The Knights Templar. We were travelling back to our city on the eastern seaboard in my renovated hearse. The psychedelic swirls of colour covering its once black metalwork flashed in the sun, so we must have appeared on the two-lane highway like God's own chariot. Appropriate, since we were returning from a Sufi-inspired festival of rock and faith concert in the Midwest, where we danced, imbibed sacred mushrooms, and joined with an eclectic range of religious groups in a program of world healing. It was intense and mind-altering for the uninitiated. But as a veteran of mind travel, it was home from home for me. For my friend Bill, it was no such thing. He was a timid man in search of a dream. I was a dreamer in search of the next brush with eternity. It was inevitable then that I'd succumbed to a half-Indian, peyote-smoking poetess's seductive charms within hours of our arrival at the site. Whereas Bill got entangled with a fervent little group of fundamentalist warriors. In the driving mirror I could see him, pumped up, excited, bright-faced, beatific, blind to the road ahead. I shifted my head and saw my own wild-haired, ragged, baggy, exhausted equivalent. No more holy holidays for me for a while. But I always said that. Bill only said one thing in the entire 4-hour trip. The evil one is among us, Ronan. We have to stop him. I thought it was a bit of post-euphoria hyperventilation. I dropped him off at his place, allowing time for minimal social niceties with his wife, Kathy, and kids, and that was it. Back to my single man's pad and my job in the library. Gradually, I tuned in to the Dewey Decimal System again. Some months later, I received a telephone call from Bill's wife. "Ronan, you must come. He's unhinged. He's not been the same since he went to that rock festival. He's been consumed by what he calls the eternal war. Not sleeping. Possessed. It's taken him over, and now he's attracting followers here, women, like disciples. He's hypnotized them. I'm worried for the kids." It took my mind back. The Woodstock-inspired week was in the vast grounds of a dilapidated estate, raising money for the commune's renovation of some old farm structures, using voluntary workers from around the globe, plus architects and artisans of every craft. One of the members of that band, the Golden Needles, you might remember their hit Heart of Honey, seemed nominally in charge, though everyone knocked back any notion of a leader. I pictured my mystic lover and our short time together. She called herself an earth exorcist, among other things. She used a pendulum to scan terrain and found groups of old iron nails buried in a circle, points facing the main buildings. This, they said, accounted for a psychic sickness in the early days of the commune. It disappeared once the nails were removed. Anyway, I saw Bill's face again in the car mirror. While I got the earth cleanser, my pythoness with the pendulum, he got a cult of fanatical latter-day Knights Templar and their crusade against evil. So, back to my tale. I received the phone call from Kathy, at her wit's end. She knew Bill liked me and trusted me, and in the past used me as a sort of counsellor during his ups and downs. The fear with which he said that he was possessed, and my sketchy memory of his week of transformation occupied my thoughts. I got organised. It was already towards midnight. I did something instinctive, bizarre. A kind of insurance policy. I phoned an unfrocked ex-Anglican priest friend, and he agreed to meet me at the location. I put a gold cross on a chain round my neck and headed off in the car, holding it in front of me as though oncoming cars might contain demons. I even said the only bit of the Lord's Prayer I could remember out loud a few times. I might say that I am not religious in any usual sense. But I lean towards the supernatural like a flower towards the sun. So, as I said, I put on a Christian symbol to ward off evil. When I got to their place, Kathy showed me upstairs to a large room. On the way, she said that Bill believed he'd been appointed by God to throw Satan back into the abyss. Otherwise, the escaped ex-archangel would wreak havoc on the world. He'd bought a big Persian carpet with a central motif and repeated satellite versions of it around its edges. This new Bill was standing, commanding, powerful and alert, with arms outstretched like a prophet, intoning something unintelligible on the central motif. And 5 women were poised, erect, on the satellites, their hands together and their eyes closed in prayer. They were all of an age and a type: midlife, middle class, white, serene. The room was lit by candles, powering, heady incense. I interrupted this theatre with my entrance, but he was unfazed. He stopped his exhortations. "I was expecting you, Ronan," he said, almost in a whisper. "Come." He motioned me towards him. I approached the centre of the room. For the first time I'd known him, he seemed taller and broader than me. He put his hands on my shoulders and stared deeply into my eyes. His gaze was hypnotic, and I had to will myself to be unaffected by it. But it grew more powerful and insistent. It was like being burrowed into. We didn't speak. Our naked wills grappled with each other. I faltered and almost succumbed. Then, with a huge effort, I shut him out and said, somewhat low-voiced but with deliberate theatricality, "Bill, I have been sent to take your burden from you temporarily, so that you can rest. Then you can return anew to your appointed role." The air in the room was electric, suffocating. His eyes were glistening, staring. Mine were mirrors, unflinching. Something snapped. The strange atmosphere in the room deflated, and it all ended. He slumped. I half carried him to an anteroom with a couch where he lay down and fell asleep instantly. The women dispersed, somewhat bemused, as though woken from a dream. It was at this point my friend, the unfrocked Anglican priest, arrived. He looked impressive. He was like a saviour. He was wearing stack heels to give him extra authority. He was fully black-robed up, including a chasuble. He had a thurible which he lit to swing incense around him. He walked everywhere around the property, including the room with the sleeping Bill. He intoned in Latin the prayer of exorcism, asking for God's help in vanquishing the devil. And that was that. Bill's wife phoned social services in the night, and he was sectioned an hour later in a hospital for the treatment of his delusions. In a matter of months, he was back to a relatively normal life, albeit on heavy-duty drugs. We avoided contact with each other afterwards. I suppose it was inevitable. Neither of us wanted to rake over what had happened or attempt some stumbling explanation. Then one day came the inevitable. I bumped into him in a coffee bar. I forced myself to sit opposite, biding my tongue. Finally, he looked up into my face. He said pleadingly, "I did it, didn't I, Ronan?" He gazed around the room frantically. "He has gone, hasn't he?" I put a hand over his. "Yes, my friend, he's gone. You did it. The world's a better place now." He half smiled, got up without further words and left. I watched his retreating, crumpled shape, a thin husk, head out into the street. Then, as my gaze took in with sudden foreboding the anonymous concrete and steel, the toe-to-toe traffic, the prowling pedestrians, and a jet lowering to land at the airport nearby, I reached inside my collar and touched the gold cross. After all, the way I had it figured, you could never be too careful. Well, that was the night's Templar. I hope you enjoyed it. Much of it was based on personal experience, and it didn't need too much embellishment to bring it to print. If you like works about the devil's business, you might try the African-inspired story on this channel called Possession. Meanwhile, please hit the subscribe button to add your name to the followers of my stories. And if you would, share links with Facebook and friends. If you like to read as well as listen, then you might go to my website, www.jacksanger.com, where you can download novels, short stories and plays for free. Or you can make a donation. In the meantime, till next time, go in peace. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.